Hello, and welcome to Optics, featured artist in the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM. I'm Krista Dix, the Executive Director of the Griffin Museum of Photography, and we are thrilled that you've joined us to hear from our featured artist, Frank Siteman. The Griffin Museum is based in Winchester, including our satellite gallery here at WinCAM. Frank Siteman is a photographer who captures our imagination with his view from above in New England. The vibrant abstracts Frank is able to produce engage our imagination with what is and what is not to scale. Welcome, Frank.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So first, let's talk about the fact that you're a Winchester resident. How long have you been here, and what made you pick Winchester?
I picked Winchester as a place to move to for two reasons. One, it had good water, and I felt that that would be beneficial for processing film. But the real reason was that there was so much green space around it on the map, and I was looking for something that was very non-urban. It seemed to have the best of all worlds.
So how long have you been here?
I moved to Winchester in 1973.
Wow. I have lived any number of places, but not in one place since 1973. That's impressive. So talk to me a little bit about your journey as a photographer and what draws you to being creative. Where did you start?
I started off being a photographer in high school, actually. My mother would drive me to various new hires in the school district, and I would do portraits of the new teachers. I ended up going to Tufts and trying to get as far away from where I came from, which was St. Louis, just because the East Coast had, such a great appeal. And so went to Tufts and ended up, after 2 years, trading the university portraits of the faculty for my tuition, which was a deal that I don't think you can get these days, but it was a good deal.
Probably not.
No. And I've stayed friends with most of the people who I worked with even back then. So that started portrait work, and then upon graduation I started teaching and freelancing at the same time, and ended up Christmas vacation of my first year out of college, taking a trip to Morocco on the spur of the moment. Something was decided within 36 hours, and I was on a Pan Am jet. And on the way to the airport, I was talking to a friend who said, "Oh, you should take a 35mm camera and make stock pictures for textbook publishers, because they'll buy the pictures to use in books." And that actually started a whole lifetime of doing stock photography, which involved just taking pictures of anything that was interesting.
And that's thousands of pictures.
Hundreds of thousands.
Well, okay. So how did you find a way to edit, or what drives you to make a photograph?
To make a photograph is to make a composition that makes you feel better in the end. It sort of visually organizes a lot of clutter that's in the world. You can throw a background out of focus and you don't have to look at so many things at one time. I also have to admit that I was financially motivated to be able to be independent, and I can honestly say I've never had a job.
Well, you have.
Well,
it's just one that you love.
Exactly.
Which is good.
Well, I can say I've never actually had to punch a time clock. I've never had a 9-to-5 job.
So many people say that they want to follow in the path of Ansel Adams, or they want to follow in the path of doing portrait work like Avedon. You seem to do all of it. So what is it that you find in each genre, as it is, that keeps you moving? How do you keep it creative in that way?
All I know is that that's what I do. I'm not sure how I end up doing it, but I can gravitate from portraits to landscapes to aerial. It's almost like each situation, each assignment had been either into a hospital situation or to a high-tech situation, a business situation. Each one was incredibly different, but the one thing that unified them was a way of clarifying what you're looking at.
Well, your vision is unique in the intimacy with which we see your subject. I know that your past work, which we're not showing here today, is a lot of street work and a lot of personal interaction. How do you meet someone on the street and feel comfortable enough to start photographing?
Another good question. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I try not to have a confrontation. ever. But was it Eddie Adams said, if you're not getting a good picture, you're not close enough. So try getting close to people, and it initiated a lot of conversations, which then became a substrate for actually getting into their lives in this situation.
Well, you've been through a lot of changes throughout the course of photography. Photography has changed exponentially between film and digital, digital like 35 millimeter cameras to point and shoots to medium format cameras. What is your favorite way to capture your subject?
I don't know how to answer that. Every subject, every situation is unique, and each one is different. And it could be from actually, it's just starting in. It's just actually picking up the camera and focusing on somebody, and then their reaction is going to determine how it goes. If people say, no, don't take my picture, you don't. Or you cajole them somehow, somehow you cajole them. I mean, I've made a life of cajoling people and end up with a picture that they appreciate, that they're proud of, that they want to go forward. Digitally makes that a lot easier because you can show them that you're not making fun of them. Mm-hmm. You're actually making them look really good, and that really spurs itself on.
So let's talk a little bit about the images that work for you and the images that don't. Have you ever had a moment where you really, really wanted an image and it just fell apart? Or is there something that you've photographed before that was completely unintentional, like a happy accident, that suddenly led you in a whole new direction in how you see and how you shoot?
I've had a lot of happy accidents. Bless me. Anyway, it's fortunate to have had a lot of happy accidents. I'm trying to think of the things that went wrong, and I can only think of two. And that really had nothing to do with me or photography. It had to do with the client who I've had some very challenging clients. And that's the only time I've ever had case in point, light setting, it's a fashion shoot. We've got maybe 2 minutes until the light is literally gone from the shoot. We're at an airport, we're out on a runway, and I have a client saying, you can't take the picture because the fold of the fabric is wrong. I said, we can work with that. I can work, no. And she insisted on going in and changing this until there was no more light. I mean, I think I got 1 or 2 frames off in the last 5-10 seconds of sunlight, and then it was just gone. All probabilities were gone after that point. That was probably the worst shoot of my life.
Oh no.
And
and nothing came out of that. You didn't find
I got the last shot.
Well, then something actually went right.
But if she had had her way, we wouldn't have.
I have a photographer friend who says that it's never luck, it's just being well prepared for whatever happens. So it sounds like you were pretty well prepared for whatever happens, or at least you keep a level head. I mean, I often think about photographers that are going out in the street and trying to find that perfect photograph. How do you tell a photographer to relax and to experience the moment while still capturing the moment?
Sometimes you have to not pay attention to the moment. It pays attention to you. You're on autopilot. I think that's probably something that differentiates successful street shooting and unsuccessful street shooting. You just keep doing it, and it starts to flow.
Do you find that photographing with your phone is easier or more complicated?
Much easier. As a matter of fact, it's scarily easy. I've been doing dog portraits for the last 2 years. And I'm doing this in an environment where there are a lot of exceptional nature photographers working with very impressive equipment, long lenses. And I was actually called by a relatively famous photographer in California asking me what equipment I was using to get the pictures I was getting. And when I told him that it was an iPhone 13, he all but hung up on me.
Well. There are the purists out there, right? So a friend of mine, Chase Jarvis, says the best camera is the one that you have with you.
Absolutely.
So speaking of that, you've not only gone from the land, but now to the air. So let's talk a little bit about the exhibition that we have currently here from above. Talk to me a little bit how you got into drone photography and what excites you about it.
Well, I got into drone photography by imagining what hummingbirds were looking at and sort of being jealous of them being able to just, flitter around and look down at things. To that end, I ended up in the early 90s finding a man in Canada who was manufacturing tall tripods. I ended up with a tripod that was 45 feet tall, which is about a 5-story building.
Yeah.
It's very
I've climbed
tall.
ladders that are pretty tall, but not
Never.
45 feet.
No. As a matter of the funniest story is like people asking me how tall my ladder was, which of course one would not have a tripod that.
No.
Anyway, so we ended up with this 45-foot tall tripod. The camera went up by itself with a mechanical means, and there was a video camera in the eyepiece of the camera feeding down a long coaxial cable to a little monitor. So I'm actually looking through the camera, and the only ability I could do was pan and tilt. And the most frightening thing was looking at the camera when the clouds are blowing, because you end up thinking that the tripod is falling over.
See, if it was my luck, it would be lightning.
It was. I never went out in lightning, but that
It's
was
good.
That was a thought. Ben Franklin was on my mind. But just starting from the tripod, was the only difficulty with the tripod is if you wanted to move 3 feet to the right, you had to take the whole thing down, lift it up, move it 3 feet to the right, and then raise it up again, taking about 10 minutes. Then came the balloon idea, which was to float a hot air balloon. Actually, let me regress. It really started with flying a camera on a kite string. So you get a kite to go up 1,000 feet, and then you attach a camera to the string of the kite, then you let it go up as high as you want the camera to go up. That was very difficult. I spent 2 or 3 years working on that. I still have the kite, but I never flew a camera. So then we went to the tripod, and then I went to hydrogen balloons. And hydrogen balloons were just out of the question. And fortunately, drones came along, and I waited for drones to get to the point where they were stable enough not to be life-threatening if they were to fall from the sky and hit somebody.
Right, but now there's also a lot of, not just the technology of the drones, but don't you have to become a drone pilot? So, your average hobbyist photographer can't just go out, buy a drone and throw it in the air.
Actually, not true. The differentiation is when you're using the drone commercially. So I do not actually accept assignments.
Okay.
I farm that off to a good friend, Steve Dunwell, actually, who's a great aerial pilot with a license. I'm not pursuing, commercial work, so.
So that makes the difference. So someone that wants to go out and buy a drone and figure it out.
As long as the thrust of what they're doing is recreational. If it's recreational, they're free to do it. The only limitations are you can't go over 400 feet, and you need to keep the drone in sight.
I can't even imagine looking up 400 feet and then seeing something that's probably the size of a pin, yeah?
It's pretty small at 400 feet.
How often do you fly at 400 feet?
Not that often. I do every once in a while to see what I'm going to see what's available to be seen. The whole point of the aerial stuff, which it makes it exciting, is it's a discovery. It's a constant discovery.
I love to fly. So every time I fly, I sit in a window seat. So you have given us a window seat to the world below us. The images that we have in this exhibition, how close to Winchester are they? Are they from all over the world?
All the pictures are New England in general, a lot from northern New Hampshire. My favorite picture in this show is walking on ice, which is not just ice skating, but someone walking across a frozen pond. No one actually has any idea of, it looks like neurons, the spring water coming up from beneath the ice.
But did you know somebody was there? I mean, was that picture planned, or was that one of those happy accidents?
Absolutely happy accident. Well, I wouldn't say happy accident. I kind of had an idea that was going to be there, having seen it a week or two prior to that. I could go back and arrange to, usually If people are in the picture, I usually try to confer with them beforehand, get their permission to fly over them. Because there was some liability. If the drone fell out of the sky, it could hit somebody. And I wouldn't want that to happen,
No.
so I want them to be aware of it. On the other hand, if I'm flying at 200 feet, I can get out of the way of people coming down. But for the most part, it's just going up and then seeing things you did not know were there, and then exploring them, then coming down closer to them, or looking at them from a different angle. It's a constant discovery, basically.
One of the bulk of the images that we've selected are all abstracts, and what I love is that I have absolutely no idea what's up, what's down, the size, scale, perspective. How do you find that moment? Is it just a matter of flying around until something hits you, or do you have some type of idea when you put the drone up in the air of what you think you might get, and then expand on that idea?
Every time I've gone up thinking I might get something, I find something different that was better than what I thought I was going to get.
Oh, that's good.
It really is.
That's helpful.
It's hard to plan, but it's fun. Scale is one of the things you don't think about. If you're flying at 400 feet, everything is small and it becomes a pattern. So that's sort of it's an interesting pattern. It's like either a paisley or a poke. From a distance, you get an idea of this pattern. I love shooting fields of grass. The patterns are abstract, sometimes subtle. But then when you start coming down lower, then you'll find something like I can't get lower than, well, I can. I was going to say, you can't really shoot. There are automatic stops on the drone to keep it from running into things. But you can land it, so you can take a picture going down low. But if you get to 2 feet, it's going to start landing on its own.
I think in golf they call those worm burners, right?
I think so. I did shoot some golfers for this show. That was in the Woburn Country Club, or the Woburn Golf Course.
Oh.
And I did talk to the golfers as they were doing this and got their permission to be flying over them as they were putting. That was fun, because I had no idea how interesting that would be with the shadows. And the shadows are another whole story, because you can't see the shadows.
So do you have a particular time of day, speaking of shadows, that you go out and find things? Or do you just know this is the moment that I'm going to go head out and see something new?
I try to work in golden light. When I was teaching.
So golden light is 4 to 6-ish?
Now it's actually
Or like
4
6 to 8,
right now it's
maybe?
like 5 to 8, almost 8. It's getting later in the summer. It's not such a secret for taking really good pictures. You shoot really early or really late. What happens early and late is you not only have directional light, but you have contrast. So you have a very warm light at the end of the day and turning blue. So you have the yellow or orange and gold and blue. That contrast, that color contrast, provides a jolt of energy, and often interpreted as being beautiful.
One of those, I think, images is of a graveyard, and there's a beautiful warm cast over the headstones. Was that at that same magic hour?
Absolutely.
And then one of the things that was interesting to me about that particular image is that we can see so much of the text of the headstones. So it wasn't terribly high, so we're not seeing the ridges, but we're actually seeing the fronts. So at what point did you swing around to be able to capture the front of those headstones?
That's another really good question. In shooting, again, going over the cemetery, which is in Woburn, it's totally different. I start off looking straight down. We're actually looking at a plan, and you're seeing the very top of the headstones that are directly beneath you, but you're looking at the north sides of the one that are south of you and the south sides of the ones that are north of you. So you're actually seeing the tops of the ones directly under you. That's a whole pattern, and those patterns.
It just seems very complicated right now.
It's not complicated if you're looking. The thing is, it's not complicated if you're looking at it, but you also don't know what's the best thing when you're looking at it. So what you do, and pixels are cheap, which is the most wonderful thing about digital photography. Pixels are cheap. I shot it from the top. I shot it from the side. I shot it from way high. I shot it from a moderate height, then came down very low, and so all of these things were, and some of the best pictures were done basically at 10 feet, 20 feet off the ground. Again, you wouldn't have a ladder that's that high, and you wouldn't be carrying your ladder out into a cemetery. But so it's really editing after that, and what are you going to choose to present? They're all interesting in their own different ways. And if you only presented one, it's going to be great.
So just so I'm clear, the drone itself has a lens, or are you attaching the camera to the drone?
The drone I'm using has a camera built into it. It's very expensive drones that weigh more than mine, and which do require a license. They can carry a camera aloft. You'll probably get a better image. The drone I'm using actually has a video camera in it, so it can shoot video or stills. It has a relatively small sensor. If I were to get a bigger and better drone, more expensive drone, it would have a larger sensor with greater dynamic range. The one I have is quite sufficient for what I'm doing. I mean, it's creating striking images. I'm not commercially using them, so they don't actually have to be any better than they are. They're quite good. I mean, I can make a perfect 1620 print that you would not know whether it had been made with a Hasselblad or with this camera.
One of the things that I love about this exhibition is the vibrancy in your color, because I just love that green. How did you see the green first and say, that's something I need to find? Or was that, again, one of those moments where you went up in the air and was so surprised that it existed?
This is one of those moments. I knew that the bullnose lilies were a pattern. I could see that from the ground. I didn't know how interesting it would be from above them, but it was the contrast of that green to the water. It was the bright to the dark. The sewage treatment plant, the algae bloom on the surface. Green is not one of my favorite colors, but the swirls and the patterns that were there that you could not see from the ground became, for me, what that picture was all about. Again, the real problem was choosing which one to present, because some that showed the entire pool and the workings of the facility, again, that was a discovery. I had no idea how those things worked.
For someone that wants to go out and do this work, what would be your best practices, or how would you suggest someone that sees your work and gets very excited about putting their drone up in the sky, how would you guide them? What would you say?
Well, if they already have a drone, I probably don't have anything to add to their discovery other than just keep your eyes open and don't do anything stupid. That's if they already have a drone. If they don't have a drone, I would suggest they find someone who does and go out with them and see it, have it demonstrated. I usually let people, in a safe environment, control the drone, have it move to the left or the right, up and down, forwards and backwards. And I'd say within a matter of minutes, they're hooked.
So let's talk a little bit about Lynch School. I know that we have Winchester High School in the show, but you are continuing to photograph Lynch. What drew you to that?
Well, it's in my neighborhood for one thing, so I don't have very far to go to get there. There's no traffic and there's no parking problems. And it's a work in progress, so it keeps changing from one day to the next. And so the first pictures I did were at the request of Winchester News.
I was going to say, if someone wants to follow the project and follow you with the project, they can get on to Winchester News, yeah?
Yes, exactly. And I'm just doing this for fun. So, and everyone else can share in the fun, is the way I'm looking at it. But it started off before they demolished the school. So there was a picture of the school in the snow, and, it's a school. And all of a sudden it's a school which is, a pile of rubble. And then it's a hole in the ground. And now it's steel construction going up. And in the near future, I'll probably be shooting the steel workers with the drone from maybe 20 feet above their heads, as they're already, 100, I don't know how tall the building is, 50 feet tall, 4 or 5 stories. It's hard to judge, literally how many feet, but I will be above them and they're going to be way above the ground.
In this world of social media, do you have videos? You say you're capturing video at the same time, or are you just doing still work?
Yeah, I could do video, but I'm not really an adept video editor. It takes a lot of time. I don't have a lot of patience. I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time
See,
left
I would
either.
think that you do have a lot of patience in that going for your walk every day and finding something new. I mean, that's dedication and it's passion. And it's patience to see what the light's going to be or what it's not going to be. But I understand the video.
I've done a few videos. and I have a lot to learn about video. I mean, for people interested in photography, the drone came with a set of neutral density filters, which are like gray filters, which usually you don't use those unless you want a really slow shutter speed, because you need more light to come in, so you have to let light come in longer and you get blur. And I just learned that you use these filters to slow the shutter speed of the video camera down, because if you don't, it becomes too jerky. So you want a slow shutter speed to have a little bit of blur in each frame so they blend together one after the other more smoothly. Now, I never knew that, so now I do. But like I say, I don't really do videos because they're hard to present.
Oh, you see, I'm an obsessive TikTok watcher, so I think there's a whole series of TikToks waiting and calling your name. But
I hadn't thought of that.
yeah. So my other question to you is, where is your favorite place to go here in Winchester?
Probably walking around Horn Pond. It's a beautiful reservation area, conservation area. There are incredible birds migrating through there all the time. As far as the drone stuff, one of the most interesting places would be the Woburn Community Gardens, which are maybe 100 plots given to Woburn residents, and it's a grid that's laid out, and half of it's, a third of it is organic, and the other is not. It's a very interesting space. I don't really go into the gardens too much. I fly above them. I let them use a drone picture of the gardens for their splash page, for their website, their Facebook page.
That's nice.
I let people use the stuff for, it's a gift.
Speaking of which, one of the images that we have is of a set of tables, I believe, or a table setting.
Yeah.
So did you find it as is, or did you photograph it with people or without?
Interesting. I was showing a book designer, publisher up in northern Vermont, Stephen Steinauer from the Steinauer Editions. Showing him the drone, and we're flying it over the small town in northern New Hampshire. And going over the town, I looked down at a parking lot of a motel, and this was again during the pandemic, and they had moved their social center, the table, chairs around it for people to have drinks and be outside and socialize outdoors, and they set this up in the middle of their parking lot. I just thought there were chairs that were sitting out there. Had no idea this was part of a pattern. There was a rug. I think there was a rug. And then all the crazy, lines, sealer in the driveway, and it took on its whole life, and it had a story to it. There were no people sitting there. If I had actually wanted to set that up, I probably would have had people there, but they really wouldn't have even looked like people. They would have looked like round heads from the top looking down.
Well, one of the things I love about that is that sense of anticipation, the idea that someone is either coming or going from that situation. Well, thank you again for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
And for your stories, and certainly for this beautiful work that you've got on the walls. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us for this edition of Optics, featured artist in the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM. Frank Siteman's exhibition Above It All is on the walls here until June 28th, and is free and open to the public during WinCAM's regular hours of operation. WinCAM is located at 32 Swanton Street. For more information about the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM or other programs offered through the Griffin Museum, log on to our website at griffinmuseum.org. Thanks for watching.